as a creative person and an artist, I feel the biggest accomplishment of being an artist beyond selling work or being in the museum or all those things is like being able to carve out your space, your personal space where you work.
Welcome back to another episode of Inside Hilton's Head, where I share a little bit about myself and try to figure out things that are really important to me. And today I am so excited, so thankful to have someone that I truly admire and fully inspired by in my home and on the podcast today. He's a son, I'll say, of Baltimore. A renowned multidisciplinary artist whose mediums include painting, sculpture, collage, performances, video, and public projects. In 2022, he established Charm City Cultural Cultivation, an organization that supports and encourages underserved communities in the city of Baltimore. Thank you for that. He's had solo exhibitions at the Cleveland Museum of Art, Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, Hudson River Museum, and the Museum of Arts and Design, and has been in many incredible group shows, but most recently, Giants, art from the Dean Collection, Brooklyn Museum of Art. His art resides in collections at the Brooklyn Museum, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, hold up. This is, there's
it's
so
too
many.
Much. It's too much.
There's so many here. There's so many things here.
You don't even got to run it through, you know?
Derrick Adams is, Derrick, I'm so excited to have you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and being in my home.
Well, I'm definitely honored to be here. I've witnessed your evolution from afar. I've always paid attention to the things that you've been doing. I've always also thought about ways that we can collaborate in the future.
Yes.
But I also am so proud that, we both are from Baltimore. We've experienced all sides of Baltimore in many different ways, and we still see the value of the city.
Derrick, I want to start, and I've been trying to start my podcast off like this because it's called Inside Hilton's Head. There's something that's been big in my life lately, and it's been sleep. You have done so much. You are so prolific. You're doing so much. You're here in Baltimore now because you're doing a lot.
Yeah.
How much sleep are you getting?
I sleep pretty well, but when I'm up, I'm up.
What does that mean?
Like when I don't lay around when I wake up. When I wake up, I get up. Like I don't sit around waiting for my brain to, start to conceive or consider. When I'm asleep, my body shuts down.
I hear you.
And I believe that's a moment of downloading information. But when I wake up, I rarely sit in the bed for a long period of time because I feel like this is the time I have for today.
Same.
To get things done. And to me, that's a motivation. I don't get stressed about that. I get stressed more about lack of movement than I get about standing still.
Yeah.
About moving. And for me, moving really is only stressful if it's not intentional.
Yeah.
Your movement should be intentional. What are you going to do today? How are you going to do it today? Those are the things, and then do it. And then from there, think about what worked, what didn't work, what you can tweak, how you can improve things you can edit out. Like these are all things that are really important to the way I move as a creative person, but as a human. But I do get rest, but I actually enjoy movement. And I think that even with my Last Resort, which is part of the programming under Charm City Cultural Cultivation, which is really more about creatives coming to rest and replenish, I think that is a balance between the two. I think some people need to have a moment of like reflection, and that means standing still.
Yeah.
Some people may need to be in a space where they can enact the things that they want to do physically. So they might need to be in a space where that support system is around them as they're doing the things that they're doing. So
would you call that different sorts of kinds of meditation?
Yes. Like I think that meditation, I think everyone should meditate.
Yeah.
Like I meditate. I have a meditation instructor. I have a yoga instructor.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I do it in my studio before I start working.
How much time does the typical
Like an
person
hour.
need? An hour. Okay.
Like
wow.
an hour. We do sound baths. We do breathing exercises.
I love that.
We do a lot of different things in my studio where I make my work. So
what is that?
Yeah.
Before we move on, what does that space look like? What does it have to feel like? Because for me, it kind of has to be surrounded by greenery, right? Because
Yeah.
that's when I feel at my best, at ease, right, and relaxed. What does your space look like for that sort of therapy?
Well, it's challenging for me because I meditate and do yoga in my studio. And what I found is that my instructor, we have to position the mat in an area that's not looking at art.
Yeah.
Like I can't look at my art if I'm meditating or if I'm doing yoga. I have to look at a blank wall, or I have to look at a space with nothing, because as a visual person, when I'm looking and trying to be present, if I'm looking at my work that I'm working on, then I'm looking at like what I'm going to do when I'm done with meditation. And so that makes it less effective for me. So my instructor, she's really great because she'll position the mat. The mat changes all the time where it's going to be in my studio based on what other corner of my studio that's not being fully utilized with art.
Got it.
And so I work better, but I do have better ideas once I'm done with meditation because I'm not looking at things. I'm able to be present in the moment of what I'm doing to make space in my head for what's possible. But I don't think about what I'm going to do after until I'm done with my meditation or yoga exercise. Then ideas really start to come into my head in a way that is almost like a flood.
I love that.
Of ideas. But while I'm doing what I'm doing, I try to just be very present, which is very difficult when you have a lot of stuff going on.
For sure.
To be present, you know?
For sure.
Yeah.
When did this process start for you as far as just like knowing that you needed that sort of break for yourself, that sort of mental health, that moment of just like, I need to sit, focus, and get, I guess, almost like restored in a sort of way?
I don't really have like a lot of downtime.
No.
Not because I can't get it. It's just that to me, as a creative person and an artist, I feel the biggest accomplishment of being an artist beyond selling work or being in a museum or all those things is like being able to carve out your space, your personal space where you work. And from that, I felt accomplished even when my studio was smaller than it is now.
Yeah.
I just feel like having a door that you can close, that no one else could come in, and you can sit there by yourself with your thoughts and think about life is an accomplishment. So I think that once I realized how valuable that was to have space with a door, I realized that to me was the goal as an artist. And everything else that happened in addition to that was a plus.
For sure.
So selling art was a plus, being in museums was a plus, being in galleries was a plus. But even if I didn't get any of those things, being able to sustain myself by having a studio to work in was the ultimate goal. And for that reason, I always teach.
Yeah.
You know, I run the art department at Brooklyn College. I'm the co-director of the art department, run the undergrad thesis. And I've always taught at different schools here at MICA, George Washington University, Columbia. And one of the reasons why I teach is because I always want to have that option of just working if I want to work.
For sure.
And not showing if I don't want to show, or not being caught in the politics of exhibitions or curatorial practices that are in line with more institutions versus what I always thought being an artist was really more about having that moment of awareness, self-awareness, and being able to deal with yourself and be in the space with yourself. And in order to secure that, you have to have a job that you know will be there, even if you decide that, maybe I don't want to make art anymore. Maybe I don't want to make any physical art. Maybe I don't want to sell anything. Maybe I want to do performance. Maybe I want to do video projections on abandoned buildings, things that may not necessarily bring in financial structure, but my true level of peace is being an artist more than selling art. Which selling art is good too. Don't get me wrong. I like
definitely
it.
Good.
It helps me to do other things, but
of course.
But I never thought I would be selling art. Like I never thought that I would be a famous artist. I never thought.
So let me hold you there then, because you grew up in Baltimore.
Yeah.
You're from Baltimore, and I will say this: I grew up in Baltimore. I am a 44-year-old man.
Yeah.
I grew up as a kid wanting to be an artist, but I grew up as an adolescent, like in the 80s.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
In the 80s for you were like a teenager.
Yeah.
Right. I was like 6 and 7.
Yeah.
I saw.
Yeah. Yeah.
The 80s swallowed my family whole.
Oh yes.
How did you? I mean, and I will say this as just a black man trying to be an artist at that time. My family saw me as this separate being.
Yeah.
Like, this is a weird individual here. For you, growing up as a teenager in the 80s, how did you escape that?
Well, I had a really unique experience. I grew up in Park Heights, and I was born in the 70s. I understood Baltimore. You kind of grew up in the 80s. So Baltimore, as it stands now, it transitioned in the 70s. The neighborhood I grew up in, Baltimore, on Park Heights, the same area that, is plagued with a lot of challenges, was like Leave It to Beaver neighborhood growing up. Like I had a totally different experience growing up in Park Heights. It was a lot of the Hasidic and the black community living kind of somewhat in close proximity to each other. There were a lot of people coming home from the war, Vietnam.
Yep.
They were coming home. It was more mixed race couples from soldiers who were coming home with wives that they met over in Asia. So I grew up in a really mixed community, primarily black, because a lot of black people moved from Pennsylvania Avenue, and moving up to Park Heights was actually moving into a better neighborhood. So most people on Pressman on Pennsylvania Avenue, most of the places were row houses. And so when you move up to Park Heights, which was primarily a Hasidic Jewish community, when black people who were working for like Sparrows Point, the shipping company, which was considered a middle class, position to be in, because you could buy a house and those. So the people who lived in my neighborhood in Park Heights worked at the school. So I went to Edgecombe Elementary School. The teachers would walk to school. You would see them as you're walking to school.
Community.
Yes, you would see the crossing guard. If you jaywalked, she would knock on your door and tell your parents when you got home from school that you jaywalked. So but then I saw drugs start to happen because when all of the shipping companies and started to close, and that was the main source of income in Baltimore, the marble industry.
Bethlehem Steel.
Yeah, Bethlehem Steel. Everyone, family worked there. Even the pastors at the church worked at Bethlehem Steel.
Yep.
Like everybody knew each other. Everyone has different positions within this structure, still dealing with racism in the city, but black people seem to carve out some sense of the American dream that I experienced as a younger person. But as I got older, when I got to be in my teens, which is in the 80s, I started to see the decline of the city because people who were home from the war and people who were home from the military didn't have jobs. And they started to realize how insignificant they were to America because they did all this stuff and they came home, they don't have any jobs. People started doing drugs.
Yeah.
People started to do criminal activity to survive.
Yep.
The fabric of the city started to unravel. And I saw it because I was a teenager and I saw families starting to fall apart.
But how did you not get pulled into it? Because I
got in trouble when I was a kid. Like, I'm not gonna, I got in trouble when I was a kid. God willing, I'm here.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that what's also very interesting about Baltimore is that people think to be poor will make you become subject to criminal activity. It's about no opportunity. It's about boredism. It's about being bored. Like when I grew up, we had after school recs.
Yep.
So we played pool, we played checkers, we had talent shows, we had teachers who worked at the school also helped us with our homework. Those places closed out in the 70s and 80s. So a whole thing happened in Baltimore that even as an adult, I had to rethink. Like I didn't even realize the trauma of the time in Baltimore until I stepped out of Baltimore and realized, this is what happened. This is why it looks the way that it looks. This is the way that I moved away in 1993 to go to Pratt in Brooklyn. In between that time of moving away from Park Heights and moving to other parts of Baltimore with my family, in nicer neighborhoods or whatever, I still understood that these things are not always a product of the people in the community. Sometimes things are done to the community that shifts the direction of the community. So I was able to think outside of being here in Baltimore by moving out of Baltimore and being in New York and seeing like, okay, Bed-Stuy, there's people who live in the housing projects, but across the street is a brownstone that's $3 million. Like, there are people who are living in two different economic places that are living across the street from each other, and they both are somehow participating in the growth of this community. And sometimes in Bed-Stuy, a lot of the property was owned by Black people who had, I guess, bought the property from whoever owned it in the 80s. So I started to see this totally merger of different types of class structures existing in a 3 or 4 block or 6 block radius that was not really happening in Baltimore.
And why was that?
Because the way Baltimore also learned that it was the first city that implemented redlining in America.
Yep.
And so because of that reason, we're still trying to deal with that now, because now as we're growing as a city, like a lot of cities are growing, we're trying to figure out how to restructure the city in a way to make us look more progressive, because the way that things were positioned, it actually hinders the way that the city can grow economically because of the way that it's fragmented and people are put in different places. And we have these highways that go to nowhere. Yeah. And these highways that were put there were put to separate everybody. And now we're trying to figure out how to do things with these neighborhoods, how to do things with these like abandoned areas. And it's happening in Baltimore. Yeah. And I'm excited to be back and here with you talking about how we can really change the way that Baltimore can continue to grow, because I feel like it's an exciting city to be a part of, especially right now.
Well, I was gonna say this because before we started chatting here, you mentioned something about the idea that you live in New York. You moved from Baltimore to New York. Yeah. Recently, I've met so many individuals from New York or creatives, filmmakers who are moving back to moving to Baltimore to create more of a creative hub of sorts. Do you see that transition in your own field? Do you see fine artists starting to make their way back here so that Baltimore can become something of a hub of sorts for creatives to really build and put work out?
Yeah, I think Baltimore is the most ideal place to be in close proximity to like New York or DC or any other city that, the economic structure is a lot more, developed. And there's ways that you can benefit from being in those spaces, but also having a base here.
For sure.
Because if you are in New York and you're going upstate, it takes the same amount of time almost to come here. So if you're going to the Catskills in New York, it's about 3 hours. It's about 3 hours coming here, a little over.
Acela takes you here 2 and some change.
Yeah, so there's no reason why creatives could not build a space here. I learned more about how to be a better Baltimorean by not living in Baltimore. I left here to find out how, when I come here, I'm always looking at the way the city is operating and loving the way the city operates. But I feel like it always gets to like that, like for instance, if Baltimore, if the mission was to get to 10, Baltimore stops at 8.
What's our problem if that's the case?
The idea of being non-pretentious also has to do with almost an inflated ego and pride. And certain things you just don't, because you're not pretentious, you'd be less inclined to network more. Yeah. Or to strategically plan to do something that you know is going to generate what you need, but it might demand more from you.
Yep.
That you don't want to do because you're not pretentious and you're not a climber and you're not a person who want to be in a space because other people in the space. But sometimes you have to be that person.
Of course.
And if you look at it as a negative thing, then it's going to be negative. But if you think that you're doing it for a bigger mission to get to a bigger goal, that's what all successful people do. And I feel like that's what I learned leaving Baltimore and going to New York, seeing places like New York and LA and Miami where it's not much different than Baltimore in the way that things are moving. But there's certain things that people understand is necessary in order for them to get to the next level of what they need to do. And it might be something that's out of their comfort zone, but it has to happen.
For sure.
And they don't do it here. They'll be like, they'll give up they'll pass on an opportunity that is beneficial because it's one thing in this opportunity that's outside of their comfort zone they have to do.
Yeah.
They might be talking to somebody they don't want to talk to, or negotiating a price that they might want for something that someone wants to talk about. They don't like the price. Maybe they want to talk about negotiating a lower price.
Yeah.
People here be like, no, it's no lower price. This is it. I was like, what place you go where people don't negotiate?
Yeah.
Every city, people negotiate price. If you have someone doing something, it's no set price. You have a price that you offer people, but if you want the job and you figure out, okay, maybe I'll do less if you pay me less.
Yeah.
And
that's
I
how
learned
negotiating
that
works.
Outside of here. I didn't learn that here. I learned that being in other cities where people realize that if I don't take this job, someone's going to take this job.
There it is.
And here, people don't care if someone takes this job.
Ugh.
If they don't want it, they be like, I'm not doing it. I was like, but you don't want it? And they don't care.
They don't want it enough, obviously.
They don't care if other people don't take it, if other people take it. It's like a thing here. It's like a prideful thing.
That's the thing that's still here, you think?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it is. I personally, my experience being here, I've experienced that. And it's not that that again is a negative thing. It's just that people here want to get paid what people in other cities are getting paid for doing the same job. But people here sometimes don't understand how much more people do in other cities for the amount of money that they want to get as well.
And we'll be right back after a break from our sponsor. Balancing work and life can be really stressful, and finding ways to work through the stress is always a goal of mine. Of course, the process of nurturing plants helps me to slow down, take a breath, and bring in joy. But unfortunately, my plants aren't licensed therapists with expert advice. Regardless if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or you're just a human who lives in this world who is going through a hard time, therapy can give you the tools to approach your life in a very different way. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible. And this is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link in my description. It's betterhelp.com/Hilton. Clicking this link helps to support this channel, but it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. And because finding a therapist is a little like dating, if you don't really fit with that therapist, which is a common thing with therapy, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. Starting this podcast was supposed to be a little extra therapy for me, getting the ideas in my head out. Good to know I can always use BetterHelp just in case Molly can't help me. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/Hilton. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. Now, back to the show. I want to talk a little bit more, I guess, dig more into your work.
Yes.
And how Baltimore plays a role in it in some sort of way. Because a lot of what you create is about the Black experience, but is that experience the Baltimore Black experience? Or would it have mattered if you had grown up in Detroit, New Orleans, like you mentioned before, South Carolina, Texas? Does Baltimore have a sort of hand in the type of work that you're creating?
I mean, yes, I wouldn't be able to make the work that I'm making if Baltimore wasn't the foundational structure of my education, my exposure to community, to understanding where the people I'm attached to bloodline came from, how they've been able to navigate around this city with all the challenges of being in a city that had extreme segregation at one point. So but I'm also, I was also privileged enough to be in a family where we've had other family outside of Baltimore, and we've got to see how other people, Black people, live in different cities where they have more access to certain things and where it's more inclusive, or whatever the circumstances. I got to see differences within the Black community from a broader perspective. And I think that actually helped me to be more empowered, or feel more empowered about being a Black person and being a creative person. Yeah. And so it's really interesting to see in my work, there's things that like my aunts or my people in my family see that they know directly is from like a image that I'm using from a family thing that I may have manipulated and did something to it, but it might be a particular thing that is really important. Like the T-shirt you have on.
Yes.
The painting that was attached to that was a woman whose head is coming out of a table, and she has like a bouquet of flowers in her head. And that particular subject matter that I used in that painting was from an actual photograph of my family's annual Halloween party. So my family would have this family only, because I have a really big family here. We would have a family Halloween party. And people would actually have to put costumes on and make them. And we would give a prize to whoever had the best costume.
I love it.
And so my aunt, she came as a table. So she took a cardboard box, she cut a hole in it, she put a tablecloth around it, she put plates and like cakes and stuff around it, cups. And she taped to the box, and then she put her head through the middle, and she made like a paper crown thing with like whatever paper mache at the top for a bouquet of flowers. And so that was a picture I saw when when I was a teenager, probably like 13, 14.
And one thing I will say, Derrick, that I love about this shirt, those of you who can't see the back of my shirt, who are watching it, and I just want to express the one thing that when I saw the shirt, the one thing that grabbed me, and this exists in a lot of your work, is what is written on the artwork. Come as you are.
Yes.
That to me was like, I'm buying that right now. I need it, because that is how I exist in this world. I'm coming as I am, and you have to accept me as who I am right now.
Yes.
Why was that the thing that was a part of this art?
It's always challenging when you're making a show or you're having an exhibition, and they want you to give a title to the show. And so when I'm making the work, I rarely think about what the show's title is going to be. I'm like always thinking about the work, but then I start really thinking about the collection of paintings and what does that really mean? And I think as a person, I have a very come as you are attitude about everything. Like the people I'm around, the people who I invite to be in my space, those types of things. But I also started to think of it as a way it relates to society. It's two things that it has a duplicitous meaning to the idea of come as you are for me. Growing up in church, that was the thing that people say. But that's not what they really mean. There are rules to it.
Of course.
You can't come as you are. Like you grew up, you can't wear certain things to church.
For sure. You can't wear a hat.
So, yeah,
that's for one.
Come as you are means more of a psychological place. Like come as you are, broken down mentally, in despair, like that. So, but I also learned as an adult looking at that, revisiting that term as how it relates to me. And I really believe in come as you are, because I also feel like it's a call to action for you to be your authentic self. I think come as you are mean if you want to dress up and be flamboyant, that's you. That's you.
Sure.
If you want to be stripped down with some pajamas on and whatever, that's you. When I say come as you are, I'm understanding the original framework that I grew up in, but I'm counteracting that with really representing that idea out again to really reflect not only in my artwork that I'm showing, but how my artwork is really giving you examples of the many types of characterizations of Blackness that I experience and that I can imagine that's authentic and not in any way pretentious. And that's what I mean by like, I don't think of myself as being pretentious. I think that the humbleness that people may say I have is because I grew up here. If I grew up in other places, I probably would have a totally different personality, because if you are here in Baltimore and you grew up in Baltimore, you get criticized for networking. You get criticized for being outgoing here.
Facts. Yeah.
You're like, you're always talking to people. You always people ask me, what do I do? What do you mean, what do I do? Like, that's what people do. When you go out to a social gathering, people ask you, what do you do? People ask you, like, how did you know this person? What made you interested in doing this thing? This is regular conversation that people have that is not pretentious. Is part of like if you're in a business gathering or a social gathering, those questions are going to happen. But here, I grew up with thinking that if you're doing these things, you are either like, it's a negative thing to do these things.
Way. Yeah.
You're talked about in a negative way. You're looked at in a certain particular way because you're curious to what other people are doing.
You know what's funny? I actually carried that energy with me to LA, being in the filmmaking space. And that's one of the reasons I still think about it, why I didn't like LA, is because every situation you were in, new situation, everyone's like, what do you do? What is your career? And I just thought it felt negative to me. Yeah. And now you're telling me it's because you're from Baltimore.
It's because you're from Baltimore. And people in Baltimore don't do that because there's no industry where you have to. So again, the creative people are successful because of self-promotion.
For sure.
Because you're not working at the state office building. You're not working for the federal government where you have a job set in place that you did your resume, you got interviewed. You have to promote yourself and to other people see you as valuable as you see yourself.
For sure.
So it cannot happen without self-promoting. Yeah. It cannot happen without you smoothing and talking to people.
Yep.
If you're thinking that all these things are negative, then they're going to be negative. But why wouldn't you don't know who you're talking to in the room when you're walking to a room. I feel like if you're thinking negatively about introducing yourself or asking people what they do, then maybe it's something that you need to kind of deal with internally.
Yep.
Because that's normal.
Yeah.
That's normal.
Outside of here, it's normal.
Yeah, it's normal. Yeah. Outside of here, it's normal to do that. Here, for people here, I believe, to excel to the level that they want to excel economically and have the level of stability that they want to have, they have to get used to doing that. Mm-hmm. Because there are people in the room with you who could help you get to the next place that you want to get to if you just have a conversation.
Yep.
This is because the city is such a humble city without a lot of pretentious behavior. It also hinders people in spaces.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing that most people in Baltimore know. Run from Run DMC and Russell Simmons are my cousins. They're my mom's first cousin. Okay. So Russell's father and my grandmother, brother and sister, their father is from Baltimore. Mm. He married their mother who went to Morgan, and he moved to New York.
Okay.
And that's why he started his family. During the summer months, he and my Aunt Evelyn, my Uncle Dan and my Aunt Evelyn, would send Danny Simmons, his older brother, and Russell Simmons to stay at my grandmother's house in Park Heights on Wally Avenue.
Wow.
Run stayed with my other relatives down in West Baltimore, which was our family's house that the family inherited, and some members stayed there. So Run, who's Reverend Run, stayed at one relative's, and Danny and Russell stayed at my grandmother's house up until the point where Russell became successful as, a big mogul, whatever. Mm-hmm. And when he started having performers, Curtis Blow stayed in my grandmother's attic because, they didn't, it was rap, and rap was like underground punk music. Mm-hmm. And Leora Cohen, who's big and within this thing, was like the road manager. So I grew up around this culture of people from Park Heights. So having this family dynamic, I always knew that being creative could be something more than just being creative. So I never felt like I was stifled being here. But the thing that made me move to New York is because I couldn't talk about how they were my family members without people critiquing me, criticizing me. I couldn't say, like, if I saw them on TV, that's my cousin.
Yeah.
Or if people heard me say that at another time and they would see it on television, my friends would say, okay, let everybody know that's your cousin. Run is your cousin. Blah, blah, blah. Let everybody know. I'm like, that's my cousin. I'm not bragging. But even if I was bragging, that's my cousin. My cousin is someone who is now famous. He's a rapper that everyone buys his record and dances to his music. And why shouldn't I say that that's my cousin if I'm here hanging out with my friends who don't know this person is my cousin? So one day when my friend said that to me, it made me think, I need to move there. So when I tell people that, they won't do that.
You need to find new friends.
It made me think like, why am I here with these people that know me and they're making me feel bad because I'm telling them that I have a famous cousin who is out here doing these things, and which most people will be like, oh my God, that's your cousin? In New York, that's what people do. When people in New York, you can have, it could be your third, fourth cousin, whatever, or LA or whatever. If you're related to anybody who is somebody who can get them to get you to a party, to get them to look at your script, to, help you get a gallery. Like, that's what people are focused on. So if I'm meeting someone who is a musician and I'm telling them that I have a person in my family who is a music producer, a person would be more inclined like, yo, I would love to talk to him. Or if you're ever doing anything that's music related, please invite me. Yeah. Like, that's normal.
Yep.
And when I was like 20, 21, I was in my house because I went to Micah for like the semester and I was here working. I had my own apartment on Maryland Avenue. Yeah. And I was 20, 21. And I had that conversation. One of my friends said that. And I thought that time, I was like, you know what? I need to move to where they are. I said, because this conversation should not be a conversation. Yep. And so I did. So I called my cousin up and I said, listen, I'm coming to New York. I applied to Pratt. I want to transfer to New York to live in Brooklyn. I just need a job. If you just give me a job while I'm in college, that's all I need to do. You don't have to give me nothing big. You open Fat Farm. It had just opened in 93. Yeah. And I was like, if you just can give me a job working at Fat Farm on the weekends while I'm at Pratt, that's good enough. I don't really need anything else. So I ended up first I was the stock person when I first got there. Then I worked my way up to be the weekend manager of the store. And then eventually, I graduated.
Derrick, there's a lot of, in your work, you see that it's Black culture.
Yes.
Do you ever feel obligated, as they say, to do it for the culture?
No. I really don't.
Could your work shift to something that is outside of Black America?
I think the work is really more about it's really more about me standing at a particular place and recording from where I'm standing, the things that I'm observing. And I also believe that there is a space that it has a void. And the space is a space where Black people are centered. And Black people are not sub-characters or fitted into something that is not necessarily for Black people. Yeah. And there have been artists who've done things where Black subjects have been centered since, the Renaissance and those things like that. But these things have always been reactionary to the lack of having these things. I'm trying to create something for myself based on what I want to see. I want to create images that really normalize the Black experience in a way that liberates the imagination of what could be made without thinking about being against something or responding to something. Like, it's not that I don't think about other races of people, but in my space, I'm not thinking about white people in my studio.
For sure.
Like, I just don't think about what white people think about me in my studio. My studio is just really more about like, how can I conjure up ideas of imagination and reflection of representations of my life as a Black person and how, as I've been out in the world, how that differs based on different types of communities that I happen to experience. And how does that relate to the overall Black experience, starting from a place of being from here, Baltimore.
So there's a lot of joy, happiness, Black joy and happiness in your work. Is that joy that has been realized, or is in that you've seen, or is that joy that you are hoping for, dreaming for?
It's really more people. There's been conversations about like the idea of like joy or whatever. I think when people say like Black joy is sometimes in writing in my work, I think that's a real thing. That's not all what my work is about, but I think that in a society where Black people are constantly challenged about their ideas, their perspective, their right to exist in certain ways, being happy is hard.
Yeah.
To know that regardless, to be taught that regardless of how smart you are, you may not get certain things because you're Black. That's what Black people learn in America.
Yeah.
They learn that you could be doing the same job that this other person is doing, and you still might not get that job. And so you, as a Black person, has to come to the reality, the understanding of that, and deal with that, and hope for the best. Hope that people can see you beyond your color and give you the opportunity that you should have. We're just discovering that actors are not getting paid the same because they're Black. People are doing the same job and not getting paid. This is something that's been happening forever.
Yeah.
Now it's becoming more public that because of how your physical appearance, you're doing the same thing this person is doing or more, you will not get what that person is getting. You shouldn't expect it. At one time, it was really more about don't even expect it.
Yep.
Now people are saying, I'm expecting it now. So to know that it does something to your brain.
Yeah.
Even the idea of like Black artists being shown like more, like it's not a lot of, the reason why people see Black art more is because Black people are really good promoters of each other.
Facts. All the way.
Black people promote each other. Like the reason why you're seeing more Black visual culture online is because Black people are sharing more images because we've removed the public relations out of getting the word out. We've actually taken control of our own PR.
Yeah.
And social media is a form of our own PR. And because of that reason, people who don't have a lot of money are able to share images of what you're doing, what I'm doing, just because they love it.
Yeah, man.
And people are paying thousands of dollars to have a PR person put that in the world for people to see. So we're in a place where we actually can be more visible. But the idea of joy is, for me, as a Black person, is something you have to take. Like you have to actually make a conscious effort to be happy.
Yes.
Like I think that a lot of Black people could be really sad if we wanted to be sad because I personally think that we're the only race I feel where we both have to be objective and subjective all the time.
Yeah.
We have to be able to look at other people's persecution and be sympathetic to it. But then when our particular ideas are undermined or underway, then we have to understand that maybe it's not a Black thing. Yeah. Maybe it's just another thing. But in all actuality, we know why certain things don't happen. Yeah. And again, that's nothing for me to be sad about. But I think to think about joy in the face of adversity is a significant way to think about the idea. But I think my work is really focused on normalcy and imagination. And I think imagination to me, I feel like is the one thing that once that's gone from any cultural group, then they're fully oppressed.
Yeah.
If you can't imagine a world other than the world you live in, if you can't imagine a world of possibilities and fantasy and absurdness and ridiculousness and funniness and whatever, then you've been completely broken. And to me, that comes from what I believe in America is living in a normal way, like a normal life.
Yeah.
Where you can actually feel carefree and feel safe and feel, there's things that we as a group still have not been able to push past in certain places. Push past. And this, again, it's something that with my work, I think that my visual output is giving viewers, not only Black viewers, but viewers another perspective to look at what the possibilities are when a Black artist centers Blackness in their work. And that's what I'm doing. I'm not doing it based on like what another artist is doing or what, the non-Black America has done to. I'm doing this because I know that this is important for younger people to see in the future when they look at art, when they look at what was happening during this time of politics and social unrest. I want them to know that it was an artist doing something that gave communities make them feel empowered.
For sure.
Make them feel normalized, make them feel like they are seen.
For sure. So your ultimate goal, from what I'm hearing, is to inspire the youth, to inspire Black folks. But if that's the case, who's inspiring you?
The elders are people I look a lot to. Older Black people who experience way more challenges than I've experienced. If I meet a Black person in their 80s or 90s who's happy, who can recall like childhood memories that were not tainted by the lack of access to spaces because of segregation and not being able to try on hats in department stores because they were Black, or the stories that you hear from your grandparents about trying to navigate their way around this idea of America that everyone says is free, but they have limited access to certain things, and you still see them happy and laughing and having conversation with you and not being like, I hate this country, or not being like, not being negative about the way they've been treated and seeing it and seeing the things that we only see online for the most part, but they've experienced it in their community. Yeah. And so to me, that inspires me to like make the work that I make, because I believe that when I'm gone, I want people to look at me the way I look at those older people who laugh and talk to me and have conversation with me about life, knowing I know they've seen trauma, knowing I know they've seen challenges. And if I talk to them long enough, they will present those ideas to me, but they also are balanced out by the moments of perseverance that they've seemed to like held on to and pushed through, and they're still here. Yeah. So I think of my work as being more like an instrument of that part of society and less about waiting for society to acknowledge me, like acknowledge my value. Yeah. But to take my cues from those older citizens where they were not valued at all, and they saw value in themselves, and that became their source of superpower. And I think that my source of superpower is being in close proximity to those people and being able to tap into their ability to persevere. And what does that perseverance look like in art? Yeah. And I think that what is going to be important is that young people, Black and white, and who all colors, is to see art made by a Black artist that is really about the Black experience in a way that is not like a picture book. Yeah. Or a literal illustration, but like what would Black people think about if they had to really use their imagination to conjure up an emotion that is tied to an experience of Blackness in America?
I love that. Are there any motifs that have made their way from the work you made when you were a child, let's say high school, college, that still stay, or have continued to come up in the work you make now?
It's funny because I was asked that question a long time ago in an interview, because when I did a show at City Hall, it was called Where I'm From, and it was during the pandemic. I started making these paintings from my family's photo album. Okay. And it kind of brought like the question, like, okay, what I was doing when I was younger. When I was in elementary school in Park Heights at Edgecombe, I had this really young teacher who I guess he had just started as well. Her name was Miss Wilson. She took a liking to me as a student because I was so focused on doing the assignment. Yeah. And to give me more incentive, because I was, I guess, finishing things so fast, she started to give me assignments where she would enter my work into contests, like citywide.
Yeah, sure.
So it would be energy conservation. It would be things like that, where students would get like merit awards. Yeah. And so she put me in a contest called My Heritage Myself. Okay. And that was a citywide contest where it was the winners got to go to City Hall, get an award from the mayor. It was Schaefer at the time, and the work hung in the mayor's office. And I don't have images of the work, but I remember what I made. And the painting was really funny. A drawing. It was a crayon drawing, but it was basically a Black American family sitting on the floor in their living room, the couch and all that, and above them was a picture of an African family, tribe family, doing the same thing with their kid. Yeah. And I was like 8 or 9. And so the picture had like the people with the straw houses and the people with the kids there. And then it was like 2 parents on the floor and then like a kid that they had in the middle. Yeah. And I made that, and I won the award, and I went whatever. And I think that always stayed in my mind, like the value of Black culture. Like I never thought that it was unvalued within my community, and even in New York, I've had the privilege of being around artists who are now being celebrated after I met them maybe 20 years ago, and they were already well known within the Black community as legends. But now in the market of art, and a lot of them are now past, their work is trading for like $1 million. But when I met them as a young artist, they couldn't even sell their work. They were, from that era where they had experienced, so many different challenges, and they were living in New York, and they had lofts, and they were cool, and everybody knew them, and they were like celebrities in the group. But they, and compared to the white counterparts, they weren't selling art. They were just known by those well-known artists who were their peers, but they were not valued, as in their work was not valued in the market of art. So having that experience of seeing all that and being aware of that, I always felt that you really have to, if you're going to be creative, you really have to be fully in it and realize that you may not make money. You may not, the things that you think you're going to do, and if you don't, what you going to do? If you don't make money, are you going to stop doing it? If you don't get a show, are you going to stop making art? Yeah. Are you only going to do it if people see you do it? Like it's things that, I found as a kid when I made that drawing, and now looking at it as an adult, I realized that I noticed what was happening in my community. I was observant of what's happening in my community culturally. And I think that particular artwork was more of like how I internalized my community and the social engagement that was happening in my community. Yeah. Because I had never been to Africa as a kid. I've just seen pictures, but I also was exposed to Africa in a way that was not about like famine. I wasn't exposed to Africa when you see people on this commercials where the kids have flies, and which was like another level of propaganda. I was exposed to Africa from like people who had, Black people who changed their names and had African names, and they did it in the 70s, and they were wearing dashikis, and they were, they were on that like Frankie Beverly and Maze vibe, and they were like super cool, and they had gold bangles on their hand. Guys had earrings. For sure. They had like sandals. They were wearing all these like cool things. So my thing of Africa from an African American perspective was romantic. Yeah. It was like, this is what it's about. Like, I love that. I felt like the people I was around was like breaking the mold of what was expected out of like this kind of middle class America aesthetic of like having a tie on and wearing a suit and having a briefcase. I saw people that were like dressing in like, little berets cocked to the side, like those things. I'm like, I never forgot that. Like some of the people, I don't even remember their names who came to my grandmother's house, but I remember what they looked like. I remember what they wore. Yeah. I remember what they talked about. I remember how my aunts would talk about them when they left. My uncles would talk about them when they left. And to me, that always made me think about like, what is cultural value? Like I was fortunate enough to experience that. And I think that brought in a level of self-esteem that I think would benefit other people if they saw these things. And they're seeing it, because there's young people who are musicians now doing things. Brandon Woody, who was amazing. We got D. Watkins doing some great things as a writer. Even my cousin Arve Adams, he's an artist. He has a shop. He's doing his thing. Like people are doing things. A lot of the Lalabella group, who is comprised of filmmakers and artists who are coming from other cities. They got transplants in Baltimore doing so. Things are happening really cool. Yeah. Hope is always the most encouraging tool to grow a city, for sure, or grow anything. And if you are lacking in hope based on not seeing things move, because you got to see movement. Yeah. I think hope is attached to movement and growth. And when people see that the city is growing in different ways with the younger community, more so, that possibilities for them to grow and to be independent are more present, then it's going to be, a much bigger, like more blown out experience for everybody to be a part of that, because they'll see what the potential is when you are really focused on developing something using your own creative energy. For sure. And I think that there's a lot of creative people here. Like, I think that... Can you give me some names?
Any that are like folks should be looking out for this person. You should be checking them out.
There's so many. Marjani is one artist that I love. She's a young artist here. Trey, Charles Mason III is an artist who I look for a lot. Even like Nick Wakinski, who is the founder of The Compound. Like he's a Baltimore local, an artist who went to MICA, just decided on his own to build an artist space for the local community, to have workplaces to work. They have a sound space where people can perform. These are all things that are in the heart of the city that people who know about them participate in them. And I think that we have the creative people here. We just need to figure out how to support them and how to teach people how to be okay with networking, how to be okay with saying what you need, how to be okay with being in uncomfortable spaces that you will benefit from by stretching yourself beyond your comfortable zone.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you have to be uncomfortable. If you want people to give you $50,000 or $100,000, you want people to give you, they're not going to give it. You have to sell it.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one's just giving people money like that. You got to sell it. Like this, you have to, this is what people are doing in other places where you see development happening. And yes, there is gentrification happening in Baltimore, like that's happening in other cities. But I think that this, unlike other cities, Baltimore has the ability, if we're able to support the younger creatives, that it will allow them to buy property. Yeah. Because a property here is not really expensive. And with some houses being like in $100,000 range, there's possibilities for younger people to be property owners. Yeah. And even if they decide to move out of Baltimore and move to a different city, they'll have some level of financial structure to rent out their house, to accommodate for them living outside, like people do. Yeah. This is something very normal to do. And I know there's some issues with some people not want to live in certain neighborhoods because of the violence and things that happen. But that's what every city in America that's now been transformed, mostly by first creative people. Mm-hmm. Most cities, even neighborhoods in New York and Brooklyn, what happened first is that, neighborhoods where there are some issues with crime and the lack of policing, there have been mostly Black creative people who move into those communities, who sometimes are usually not from that city, who visually identify with the people in the community, and the people in the community feel more less invaded by these Black creative people. These Black creative people create community-driven initiatives in certain neighborhoods that, unfortunately, because they can't afford to buy the property, they become the ushers for gentrification. Yeah. Because they've put in all the time, the work to make this community safe, to get the community members to trust them, to do all these things. But in turn, it creates this visual intrigue in moving into these neighborhoods, because now these neighborhoods are functional in a way that they could be massaged into other things. Yeah. And what happens a lot of the time, the Black creatives get priced out because they were never in a position to financially to be able to purchase a property because of the high price of the mortgage. Yeah. Baltimore is the only possibility I see when you think about creatives in this city or people moving from cities like New York or Miami or LA or DC to Baltimore, because if you are a creative person, this is a place that you can enact your dream. Yeah. I personally, even though my roots are now, I'm in Baltimore, but my life is in Brooklyn and New York, I still feel that there's an important link between being there and being here, and figuring out how some of the things that are happening there within the creative community can somehow extend to benefit the people here through tactic understanding, through structuring understanding, things that we could take, things that we can not take. Like it's a thing that we can pick and choose, but knowing all of it, being open for all of it, and implementing as much as we can to change the direction that it will benefit the creative community. And when I say the creative community, and I say, the things I do focus mostly on the Black community, is not that I don't think that the other communities need support. I'm on the board at the Compound, which is a more diverse group of artists that they support. I'm part of other artist initiatives that are way more broad and diverse. But I believe that a city like Baltimore can never really evolve unless the Black creatives are given that proper acknowledgement of their second-class status being brought up to even out what other people are easily getting.
For sure.
And until that happens, then how can it be a progressive city if when you do a residency, if it's 15 people there, 1 or 2 Black people are in the residency, when Baltimore has like 60, almost 70% Black people in the city. Yeah. So why is this residency only 2 Black people in the residency? So I believe that the things I'm doing on the side of what I'm doing for the overall community is really giving Black people a sense of centering them so they don't feel like they only are included in something as an added diversity status, structure. Mm-hmm. I want them to feel that because when they walk outside, everyone around them has some visual appearance that is mirroring who they are, that there's a space where they can feel like that's not something that we need to talk about anymore.
Got it.
Because you're in this space. And because you're in this space, everyone can identify with that basic principle. Now what else can we talk about?
Can you tell us a bit more about the Compound?
So the Compound is a space in Midwood that was founded by a group of artists. And again, Nick, who I spoke, was the founder. Mm-hmm. So the Compound is a studio building with a sound stage with local performers. Some people come nationally there to perform, but they have studios for artists to work in. They have a common area that is kind of nestled in to this other bigger complex, but now they've just recently got a grant to build a passive house. And the passive house is a house that kind of is self-sufficient. Like it's built in a way that it utilizes less heat from outside. Mm-hmm. It generates everything.
Yep.
And so they just opened it. I joined the board. We took applications. People just started to move in.
Okay.
There's studios there. A 1-bedroom apartment is like $650.
Oh wow. Okay.
A studio is like $300 to maybe like $150 to $300.
Wow.
And that's like the basic price line of being in this space.
Yeah.
Which in Baltimore, that's not even possible normally to have spaces, depending on size, but not a brand new studio that's completely renovated or apartment that's completely renovated for that price. Mm-hmm. And so that is a foundation or organization that has a more of a broader, more diverse reach of participants. Yeah. I'm dedicated to helping them to advance their mission. Mm-hmm. My mission for the Last Resort and for the database and for Zora's Den is to focus primarily on the underserved Black community in Baltimore who don't even know like where to go to get an editor if they want to write a book, mm-hmm. or how to find someone to help you like fine tune your art practice. Yeah. Or to, like, these are things that I've been privileged to have experiences with leaving Baltimore. And I want to make this really a normalized thing for people here. Awesome. Because I feel like that's a hiccup that I want to avoid for how people should get to the next level. There's Black people who think that if they walk into a regular gallery, it costs money. Mm-hmm. I don't know what other races of people think. I just know from my experience working in a gallery that and a museum is something that was not part of our normal social experience here in Baltimore. The BMA, I went to the BMA for the first time in my 30s.
Yes.
I went to the Walters Art Gallery on a school trip in elementary school.
Yep.
That's the only time I've been there.
Yeah.
I've never been in any museum here as a normal thing. I've seen the museum many times driving past it.
For sure.
As a teenager, as an adult, but there was no public programming that catered to the community in which I was a part of. Mm-hmm. That's why the museum structure was private back in those days. Mm-hmm. So now that it's changing, and I think what the new director, Osman, who is amazing at the BMA, things are really starting to open up. And I think the museum in Baltimore is having a moment right now.
Yeah.
I think Baltimore as a city is having a moment. And I just want to make sure that we don't drop the ball.
Derrick Adams, you are an inspiration, man. I am so inspired by you. I can't believe that we finally got the opportunity to do this in my home. And the fact that you've put so much energy back into the city. I thank you. The city thanks you. What is the next thing? What can we be on the lookout for? I was, you mentioned this shirt that I'm wearing. Yeah. I can't afford your art, but I could afford this shirt. Is there any future collaborations we should be on the lookout for? Is there anything that someone who wants to own a piece of what you put out there to be inspired by? Maybe there's a book. What should we be looking out for from you?
Like a lot of things that I'm creating outside of my studio practice of exhibiting my work is ways where I'm constantly thinking about how to direct attention to this city. Like that's like one of my things I love when I'm working with a brand, a collaboration. I always say to them, I want you to donate money in addition to paying me to do this collaboration, I want you to make a donation to my Baltimore nonprofit.
Love it.
And people do. Like, it's not
That's awesome.
Something that people even hesitate because they know that I feel strongly about the city I'm from and that the money that I'm getting is being used to build up the city in some ways or the creative community. So that's one thing that I really focused on. I think that the merch is something that people can support. And other things that I hope over the summer that will be available to people if they just check in. I'm on Instagram at Derrick Adams NY, or I'm DerrickAdams.com, or you can go into CharmCityCulturalCultivation.org and you'll see updates of what we're doing. But I don't live in Baltimore. I grew up in Baltimore, but Baltimore is still on my list of my top interests in support, more than I think that Brooklyn needs my support.
For sure.
Like, I don't think that Brooklyn needs me. There's plenty of people in Brooklyn who have nonprofits. There's plenty of people who are doing community-related endeavors in Brooklyn, and I think Brooklyn is good for that. But I think that we need to be able to say that here. Yeah, it's too many things going on, so much. So I'm going to keep thinking about ways I could create revenue that would somehow be directed here.
I love that. Thank you, Derrick.
Thank you.
Balancing work and life can be really stressful, and finding ways to work through the stress is always a goal of mine. Of course, the process of nurturing plants helps me to slow down, take a breath, and bring in joy. But unfortunately, my plants aren't licensed therapists with expert advice. Regardless if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or you're just a human who lives in this world who is going through a hard time, therapy can give you the tools to approach your life in a very different way. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible. And this is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link in my description. It's betterhelp.com/Hilton. Clicking this link helps to support this channel, but it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. And because finding a therapist is a little like dating, if you don't really fit with that therapist, which is a common thing with therapy, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. Starting this podcast was supposed to be a little extra therapy for me, getting the ideas in my head out. Good to know I can always use BetterHelp just in case Molly can't help me. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/Hilton. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel.